Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Pittsburgh Sports Memories podcast. I am your co-host, Tim Hannon. With me,
Your other co-host, Steve Ward.
and on this episode, we're going to go way back in time to talk about a little-known story. So, if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you know, I we cover a lot of things that that are popular with folks like Steelers winning the Super Bowl, things like that. I really like these little known, kind of forgotten stories that we a lot of fans don't know about, and sometimes people like this, sometimes they don't, based on the number of downloads we get. So if you're listening, thank you. This one's going to be about a guy by the name of Ed Dehaney, who was a pitcher for the Pirates on the 1903 Pirates team, which was the team that went to the first ever baseball World Series. And Ed Dehaney's story is definitely one that has a lot of ups and downs. Definitely a story of triumph, and then just a story of just real total catastrophic collapse. So let's talk first about who Ed Dehaney was. He was born in 1873 to Irish immigrants in Vermont. And we don't know much about his childhood, but what we do know is he grew up in New England and he liked to play baseball. And baseball is a sport that really takes off after the Civil War. That's when you start to hear terms like national pastime. And Dehaney, he's part of the first generation of kids that grows up playing baseball and grows up with the prospect of there being a professional league that the best of the best can someday play in. I mean, imagine that, Steve. I mean, baseball was around in some form for a lot of years, and you're playing this game, with your friends and on a farm or in a street or whatever. Up until this generation of kids, there's no, oh, I could play this professionally someday, right? It's just a game.
Well, I mean, back then, if you were, I don't know, 21 years old, you were just lucky to not be working like 15 hours in a cannery by that point. I mean, making the 21 was probably like the equivalent of like 35 or 40 by like 19th century standards. Well, I guess 1873, 21, what that, 1890 something?
Yeah.
94, 95. So
Yeah, and you're right about the kind of like the industrial blue collar kind of work. If you weren't doing something like that, that was probably your future was working in a mill or something like that. There was a lot of that kind of stuff going on at this time. So Dehaney, he grows up really enjoying baseball, and he tries to make a career out of it. When he's 21 years old, he's playing in the minors, and he's a pitcher. And the Boston Globe actually writes about him because he's starting to make some waves there in the minors. And eventually the Giants scout him and they offer him a contract to come play in New York. The Giants are in New York at this time. This is
the New York baseball Giants.
The New York baseball Giants, years before.
Ooh, I always wanted to say that. My goodness, is like 50 years before they moved
to San Francisco. Yep. Dehaney makes his major league debut on September 16th, 1895, and it doesn't go real well. He starts 3 games that year. He gives up 37 hits, 19 walks. He hits 3 guys, throws 4 wild pitches, and allows 22 earned runs. This is in 3 starts.
I was going to say, what's his pitch count for that game? My gosh.
Yeah, I mean, and this is we'll get into this more later. This is definitely the era where guys generally threw complete games, but that's still not a good start for Ed Dehaney. The New York Times wrote about his debut, quote, "Dehaney, though slaughtered, showed the earmarks of a ball player," and I'm not sure if that was meant to be like encouraging or sarcastic. Could sort of be read either way. But he doesn't have a real solid start, and you're thinking, maybe he's not going to make it. But he does calm down after that, and the next 2 seasons go a little bit better. In fact, in 1897, he posts a 2.12 ERA, which is tremendous. except he only pitches 85 innings all season. So why does he only pitch 85 innings? Was he hurt? No, he actually keeps getting suspended for, quote, breaches of discipline. And what was reported at the time was he was drinking a lot. He would show up to the ballpark drunk, or sometimes he would not show up at all, even on days he was scheduled to pitch. He's also apparently very paranoid. He keeps getting in fistfights with teammates because he would falsely accuse other guys of stealing things from his locker. Now, the Giants at this time happen to be owned by a guy named Andrew Friedman, who's really mean and who everyone hates. Albert Goodwill Spalding, who's really instrumental in the founding of the National League, actually tries to force him to sell the Giants because he thought that guy was so bad for the league. So Dohany's getting into trouble, but how much of that is him? How much of that is being part of a toxic organization? Well, he was about to find out because in the middle of the 1901 season, he is traded to a team called the Pittsburgh Pirates. So let's talk about where the Pirates were at this point. The Pirates had joined the National League in 1887. I think, Steve, they were around before the National League. I don't know where they were playing before that, but that's kind of their official beginning, I think, is what the team celebrates, is when they joined the National League in 1887.
Yeah, I only remember like in 1987 when I went to the games, it was like their centennial season, I think. Yeah.
Yep.
They had the little pirate guy who would like laugh, be like, "Ha, we've played for 100 years, and we've sucked. We've sucked for a lot of them." Actually, that really isn't fair because they really hadn't started sucking like they have right now. But
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, hey, it's the Pirates. I don't know who owned them back then, but
Oh, well, good question. So the Pirates are owned by a guy named William Kerr. And like the Giants owner, he's not very well liked. He's very Steinbrenner-esque. He's impatient. He fires managers a lot. We talked in our Guys You Forgot Played for Pittsburgh episode about how Connie Mack got ran out of town by Kerr and then went on to manage the A's for 50 years.
Well, that was a smart move by him.
Right.
I'm pretty sure Connie Mack's in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Also the all-time winningest manager in baseball history. But other than that, didn't really do anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, under this guy, William Kerr, the Pirates, they're not a bad team. They're kind of a middle of the road team for their first 14 seasons. Sometimes they're above 500, sometimes they're below 500, but they're never really in serious contention for anything. And a big change happens in baseball after the 1899 season, because at this point, baseball is not doing well. The attendance is way down, and this is pre-television. So attendance is the only way you make money, selling tickets, right? That's how you make all your revenue. There's a lack of competitive balance in the National League. There's also a national depression. Steve, you're the history buff. You might know more about what was happening in the 1890s from a depression standpoint.
There always were run-on to banks because there was no banking laws. Like, it's kind of crazy to think there was like no FDIC or anything like that, which, I mean, I guess, not all government's a bad thing, because like it would kind of suck to like go to your bank tomorrow and be like, nah, hey, all your money's gone, buddy. Yeah. That's why like they always joked about keeping money in your mattress, because like literally, if you didn't go to a reliable bank, Have you ever looked at the way like the older banks are built? Do you ever notice that they're built like huge coliseums, with marble and everything? It's like, this is going to be around for 100 years. And that, I think that was to instill confidence that you put your money here, we ain't going nowhere. So, but anywho, I digress. I mean, baseball's not doing well. People probably don't have the disposable income. Once again, we're still in the early 20th century, and Lord knows Henry Clay Frick is not going to give those Homestead strikers any money.
Well, if there's like, to your point, if there's a national depression, you're not going to have the disposable income, or you're going to be very selective about where you spend it. And at this time, the atmosphere at baseball games was not pretty. There was a lot of fist fights. There was foul language, people getting drunk. Imagine all that happening at a sporting event. Huh, that'd be terrible.
Yeah. I mean, it almost sounds like a Dodgers game.
But it's kind of seen at the time as the same as going to like a seedy bar at 1 a.m. So you're not going to take your kids. You're not going to take your wife, right? It's driving away families. And there's also this guy named Ban Johnson that takes notice of all this. And he goes off and he creates a rival league called the American League, which features, among other things, a strict conduct policy for its players. So he's out there promising more of a wholesome family atmosphere and cheaper ticket prices. So the National League owners know they're in trouble because at this point the National League's the only game in town. They basically have a monopoly. Now there's this rival league. They're losing attendance. People aren't interested in baseball anymore. They've got to do something. They've got to make some changes. So they get together that off season and they decide, one of the things they decide is there's too many teams. The National League had 12 teams and they decide they're going to contract 4 of the 12 teams, leaving them with an 8-team National League. And oddly enough, all 8 of those teams that they contract to are still in the 15-team National League.
Let me see if I can name them. All right. So I only got to name 8, right? Okay.
Yes.
So obviously the Giants.
Yes.
Okay. Obviously the Pirates.
Yes.
Would it be the Red Stockings? Would they be otherwise known as the Reds? Have to be the Reds. Oh, now it gets tricky. Were the Dodgers around yet?
Dodgers were around.
Okay, so I got Dodgers. No team in. Was there anybody in Boston with the Boston Braves? Maybe.
Yep, Braves were there.
How many am I up to? 6?
5. You got 3 more that you're going to kick yourself if you don't get them.
Are they Senators? No. Washington? No, Washington was an American.
That was an American League.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Can't be clean. St. Louis? No, St. Louis was not around, right?
Yes, St. Louis.
The Cardinals, not the Browns.
Yep.
Didn't they have a Browns team or something?
American League. Browns were an American League team.
Okay, so the Cardinals. So I only need 2 more. I'm gonna kick myself for not knowing these last 2, ain't I?
And time's up. Okay, it's the Cubs.
Oh, come on, so obvious. Oh no.
And the Phillies.
The Phillies. Yeah, the Phillies have been around forever. But
so those are
the Phillies were never managed by Connie Mack, right? No, it was the A's.
Yeah, you're mixing up your National League and American League teams. And we'll actually talk about that later because one of the things Van Johnson does on purpose is put teams in the same cities as National League teams. So we'll kind of get into that.
Well, 6 out of 8, that's not bad. And I really should have the Cubs. The Cubs and the Phillies, come on, man.
You should have. So why is this significant for the Pirates? Well, for one, they're one of the teams that survives, right? They're still around after we go from 12 teams to 8 teams. But one of the teams that the league contracts is this team called the Louisville Colonels. And the Colonels are owned by a guy named Barney Dreyfuss. They also have a pretty stacked roster. They have guys like Fred Clark, Deacon Philippi, and some guy named Hannes Wagner all playing for them. But now they're not a team anymore because the National League has just basically eliminated them.
I wonder why they picked Pittsburgh over Louisville. Just because maybe the steel mill's bigger population back then than Louisville? I don't know.
I'm sure they analyzed all that. I mean, there was a team.
And they're like, but their little monocle and like writing things down. Hey, smoky filled room. Yeah, cigar ash.
I'm sure they had some spreadsheets and, figured out some numbers. But Barney Dreyfuss, the Louisville Colonels owner, he still wants to be in baseball. So he starts working on a deal to buy into the Pirates ownership. And he actually travels to Pittsburgh to meet with Kerr, the guy that currently owns the Pirates. But those negotiations fall apart. And Dreyfuss is quoted in one of the Pittsburgh newspapers. And here's this quote. "I am sorry that I cannot leave the sum of money that I have with me in Pittsburgh, but Mr. Kerr does not want it, so I guess I'll take it home." I don't know if he said it like that, but again, that's how I read it.
Maybe Barney Dreyfuss keeps his money under his mattress and not in the bank that's going to fail.
Well, apparently he had it apparently he took it on the train to Pittsburgh and took it back home with him.
To Louisville.
Yeah. So it doesn't look promising, but as negotiations often go, that's not the end of the story. And eventually part of the deal becomes that Dreyfuss will bring along his best players from Louisville. And that generates some buzz amongst Pirate fans, which, you can imagine, right? Imagine if the NFL decided to eliminate like the Minnesota Vikings and there was a potential deal in place for the Steelers to get Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson and all their best players. People would be kind of excited about that, right?
It is
So
the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, can't you pick a better team? Like, I don't know, the Rams or something?
same principle.
Yeah.
So on December 11th, a deal does get done. Dreyfus becomes the majority owner, and a bunch of players from Louisville are now Pirates, with Fred Clark being named as the manager. So Fred Clark had been managing and playing for the Colonels. Now he'll be doing the same thing in Pittsburgh. And this is just a huge blockbuster deal because it turns the Pirates from basically a mediocre team into an instant contender. And by the time that Ed Doheny is traded to the Pirates in 1901, they are in fact a first place team. So that's just interesting. The Pirates, basically make a deal with this team that's being eliminated to share ownership. And if they did something like that today, I'm sure there would be some kind of like, I don't know, whatever the opposite of an expansion draft is.
Virtual draft? I mean, would you call it? Yeah, you'd have to, like, if the Penguins would have went under like a couple years back when all they had were like Yager and Straka, it's like you would have had the same scenario.
Yeah, it wouldn't have just been a free for all, right? Yeah. They would have come.
It would have been like the Flyers, but like, okay, we're just taking Yager and Straka and a couple other guys. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. But back then, it was a free for all, and because Dreyfus is buying into the Pittsburgh team, he's bringing his players along with him. So very interesting deal there that actually turns the Pirates again into an instant contender. So that trade in 1901 is made mid-season. It's not an off-season trade. It's actually a middle of the season trade for Ed Doheny because the Pirates needed a left-handed pitcher. And one of the reasons they needed a left-handed pitcher is because they are about to dump Hall of Famer Rube Waddell. He's the guy we talked about in our Big Personalities episode, Steve, the guy that chased after the fire trucks.
Yeah.
Only showed up for games when he felt like it. This was around the time that they were just kind of like done with that guy. So they go out and trade for Ed Doheny. Now, to be fair, Doheny has a checkered reputation coming in, right? We talked about in New York, he had gotten himself suspended. He had gotten into fights with teammates. But the Pirates decide to take a gamble on him anyway, and it really pays off. Doheny is 2-5 as a starter for the Giants that year. After the trade to Pittsburgh, he goes 6-2 for the Pirates, and the Pirates win the pennant. And there was no World Series at this point, so the team that finished with the best record in the league won the championship, and that's it. They win the pennant, and they were the champions. It's the first championship of any kind.
How very college football of them to not really. Well, I guess they actually decided it on the field. So
yeah, they actually had standings, and like they didn't have people vote on it
at the end of the year. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it was just basically whoever finished in first place won, and that there was only 8 teams, so they didn't have a playoff or a tournament or anything, and Pittsburgh's the champion. It's the first championship for a Pittsburgh pro sports team of any kind. So 1901, the Pirates win the pennant. They come back the next season and put together arguably one of the most dominant runs in baseball history. 1902, they go 103-36. They only lose 36 games all year. They win 80% of their home games, which is still a franchise record, which I'm sure will never be broken. They lead the league in every significant batting category. They scored 775 runs, which is 142 more than any other team that year. So offensively, they're a juggernaut. Their pitching is also dominant. At one point, they post 6 consecutive shutouts, and they allow the fewest home runs in the history of Major League Baseball. Steve, guess what that number is? How many home runs did the 1902 Pirates allow?
Well, I already looked at the number. I'm sorry. But it was the dead ball era, Tim, so.
It is, but 4 home runs. They allow 4 home runs all season. So.
Hey. You didn't come into Exposition Park and walk out with a win, that's for sure.
No, you didn't. So they win the pennant for a second consecutive year, and they win it by 28 games over the second place Dodgers.
It was over in like August. It was like the Pirates' magic number was being posted at the 4th of July.
Literally. I mean, and this is an 8-team league, too. I mean, right today, you would only have to beat out 4 other teams to win your division. I mean, back then you had to beat out 7 other teams, and they still won the league by 28 games. So the 1902 Pirates are even better than 1901 Pirates. Doheny, he's flourishing. He goes 16-4 that year. So he's really turned his career around. He's on this you know budding dynasty of a Pirates team, and they win back-to-back National League pennants. Fun fact before we leave that 1902 season: Honus Wagner pitches 5 innings that year and allows 0 earned runs.
Just for fun. It's like
apparently,
it's like, hey, we're up. We got like a 28 game lead. Let's pitch like our really good shortstop.
Yeah, I don't know the context behind that, but I just saw the stat.
Just remember, you could dirty up the ball, scuff it, throw spitballs. Hey, it's all legal, man.
Yeah, it's a very different game at that point.
Garrett Cole would have had himself a good old time.
So let's talk now about what happens that offseason, the offseason between the 02 and 03 seasons. And we talked about Ban Johnson starting the rival American League. And by this point, by 1903, that league had really taken off. And Steve, you were kind of guessing some of those cities. Johnson had put teams in some of the cities that had been contracted, like Washington and Cleveland, but he also put teams in cities that had National League clubs like Chicago and Philadelphia and Boston. So the American League also had 8 teams, and the 8 American League teams, I'm just going to list them.
Yeah, I'm not going to try and guess them.
I'm going to list who they are today instead of trying to go through all the kind of the genealogy. The Yankees, the Red Sox, the White Sox, well, the Guardians, I guess they're called now, the Tigers, the A's, the St. Louis Browns, who you mentioned, who became the Baltimore Orioles, and then the Washington Senators, who you mentioned, who became the Minnesota Twins. So those are your 8 original American League teams that are still around today.
So the Texas Rangers aren't the Washington Senators. Why did they? So okay, they moved to Minnesota. Okay.
So they kind of are, because when the Washington Senators became the Minnesota Twins, they gave the Washington a new Washington Senators team,
and that team left too.
Yeah. That team became the Texas Rangers.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know why I know that, but unfortunately I do. So
Washington's lost 2 baseball teams named the Senators.
Correct.
Nice.
So the American League's kind of booming, and they're also raiding players from the National League. Like the 2 leagues are basically like at war with each other. So the National League owners are like, hey, this isn't going to end well for us, or probably for them, if we just keep fighting each other. So in 1903, they form an agreement with the American League. So now there will be 2 major leagues, separate but equal, kind of how it functions today. And the 2 leagues agreed, they would honor each other's contracts. They also created this National Baseball Commission, which was basically a panel of guys that would govern the sport. So they would kind of exist, again, 2 separate leagues, but under the same set of governance. Again, not hugely different than how baseball works today.
There was no movement clause between the leagues too, like you couldn't move between the teams. That was I forget do you remember? I know that's in Ken Burns' baseball documentary. I forget the name of that. There's a specific name for that, but that was a big thing too. So.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, and I'm blanking on the name of it too. But you're right. Basically, what you're referring to is that the owners basically owned the players
for life. Yeah,
right.
If you wanted to play professional baseball, like Honus Wagner would always have to play for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Ty Cobb would always have to play for the Detroit Tigers until perpetuity, unless they traded him. The only way you would leave a team is if you got traded.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Now we have 2 separate leagues, and they're going to live at peace with each other. One notable thing that's absent from this agreement that's made in the offseason of 1903, there is no, hey, let's play each other at the end of the season in a championship tournament kind of agreement. No one actually had thought of that, at least not yet. So when the 1903 season begins, they're just 2 separate leagues under the same set of governance. So the 1903 season for the Pirates kind of starts at a disadvantage. Their winningest pitcher in 1902 was a Hall of Famer named Jack Chesbro, who had won 28 games for them. He goes and signs with the Yankees. Hey, that sounds familiar. So the Pirates lose this 28 game winner. Fortunately, they still have Deacon Phillippe, who by this point is arguably the best pitcher in the National League. But, losing a guy that won 28 games is going to hurt a little bit. They do start the season slow. They're in third place by June, but then they get really red hot. They reel off a 15-game winning streak. A big part of the success of that, that winning streak in that season is Ed Doheny. He's having another really good season. He's 12-6 by the middle of the season, and he's really filling that void left by Chesbro, the guy that won 28 games. So the Pirates lose this really good pitcher, but they're rolling again, and Ed Doheny is a big part of that. So again, looks like, man, what a great trade. This is really working out. Thank goodness we have this guy. But then some cracks start to form in the armor, just kind of like what happened in New York. So Doheny starts getting into arguments with teammates. Once again, just similar to New York, he's accusing them of stealing stuff from his locker. I don't know if stuff was like missing or if he thought.
Stop taking stuff from his locker.
He has some kind of goofy moments in games too. They're playing the Giants, and he pops up to the catcher, and the catcher's about to make the catch, and Doheny throws his bat at the guy to try to stop him from making the catch.
Not sure that's legal.
Not legal. He actually that earns him a 3-game suspension from the league.
Wow,
for doing that.
Only 3 games. Nice.
Yeah. I mean, lucky he didn't get more because you could obviously hurt somebody pretty good with throwing your bat at them.
Spitball, yes. Bat throwing a catcher, no.
Right.
And I don't think, did catchers wear like any equipment by that point? I don't know.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, maybe. I'm sure whatever they were wearing was not very protective like it is today. So yeah, this stuff, arguing with teammates and having a kind of a weird moment where he threw his bat. It's not good stuff, but is this at this point, is this like Juju dancing on the logo kind of nonsense where you just kind of shake your head? Or is this like full on Antonio Brown cancer on the team? Right. And at this point, it's kind of hard to say. So while all that's going on, Pirates owner Barney Dreyfuss has an idea. And his idea is, hey, now we have 2 leagues operating under the same set of rules and the same set of governance. Wouldn't it be fun and also probably very profitable to stage a championship contest between the winners of the 2 leagues at the end of the season? So he actually goes, instead of taking this to like the league, he actually goes to the owner of the Red Sox, a guy named Henry Calea, and he says, hey, we're comfortably in first place in our league. You're comfortably in first place in your league, and it looks like both of us are going to win our respective pennants. Assuming that happens, what do you think about playing each other in a series at the end of the season to determine a champion between the 2 leagues? And that's kind of a bold thing to do, given that the season like still has a few months left to go. Like he's planning a series between the 2 winners when they haven't won the leagues yet. But that's what happens, and the Red Sox owner is all for it. Ban Johnson, the guy who started the American League, he's all for it because after all, this would be his big chance to show everyone that he's got the superior league. And so everybody agrees, and they decide it will be a 9-game series. It actually doesn't become a 7-game series until the second World Series. It also, fun fact, reverts back to a 9-game series between 1919 and 1921.
Just really wanted those extra 2 games. Well, I guess if you get to stretch it out to make
money, yeah. But it's really been a 7-game series the entire time it's been played.
Is that after? That's after the 8-men out scandal too, huh?
That was a 9-game series.
Yeah.
So that was 1919.
Yeah.
So those 3 years, for some reason, they extended it, and then they went back to 7.
Charles Comiskey wouldn't have any of that. Yeah.
But this very first year, they decided it's going to be a 9-game series, and Dreyfuss names it the World Championship Series, later shortened to just World Series, and that's how baseball's World Series was born.
Good. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't know how many world players were in there, but they were all Americans. So whatever.
Yeah, that was kind of the funny thing about it was it's obviously not a World Series. I mean, you mentioned, Steve, all the teams were also on the East Coast of the United
Yeah.
States,
Yeah.
so it was very far from a World Series, but that's marketing, right? You give it a name like that, World's Fair, World Series, and it just sounds bigger. So that's what they called it. And Dreyfus, he that was a smart move to create something like that. And kind of ironic too that the owner of a franchise who will probably never again play in said tournament is the one that created it.
Hey, you never know. They could
Yeah,
turn it
no,
around.
I know. Uh, so it's not meant to be an annual thing at this point, by the way. I mean, this is literally just, again, the Pirates and Red Sox agreeing to play in the series, assuming they both won their leagues. And I think at this point they just kind of want to see how it goes. Are fans going to respond? But there was no agreement in place to do it after 1903.
He waits. He throws the pass, and it's intercepted. George Polamalu at the 40, 35-30.
Steelers versus Ravens is the best rivalry in all of pro sports. And now that series has been chronicled in Pittsburgh versus Baltimore, the unofficial history, an all-new book from the Pittsburgh Sports Memories podcast. Relive all the fierce battles and exciting moments from this amazing rivalry. There were legendary plays like Troy Polamalu's pick six and the immaculate extension, and there were crazy incidents like Joey Porter chasing Ray Lewis into the parking lot, or the Ravens putting a bounty on Hines Ward. We cover all of it, including some stories you may never have heard. Buy a copy for yourself, or get one as a gift for the Steelers fan in your life. Find it on Amazon, or see the link in the show description of this episode. And thanks for supporting the podcast.
So meanwhile, the Pirates, they're tugging along. The season seems to be going pretty good for them, but there's more trouble from Doheny. He's drinking pretty heavily. Again, this was reportedly a problem when he was in New York. Not sure if that stopped at one point and then started up again, but he starts becoming convinced that he's being followed by undercover detectives, and that becomes an increasingly bigger problem. And on July 28th, it all comes to a head. Doheny goes to manager Fred Clark, and he tells him literally he can't handle the constant surveillance by these detectives. And so he's going to give them the slip by boarding a train for his home in New England. And Steve, how do you respond to that if you're Fred Clark? Like,
Well, they call it therapeutic communication in some of the medical circles. You'd say, well, I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, I don't think it. Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't see anybody following you, but if you're seeing them and you feel that way, maybe we can help you. But in 1903, they did not have psychotropic medicine. They had cocaine, maybe. I don't know. That probably wouldn't help his paranoia much. But
yeah, I was going to say that's not going to help.
yeah. Have some Coca-Cola fresh from the pharmacy across the street. That'll help your paranoia.
So that's what happens. He gets on a train and he goes back to New England, and that news breaks, and the Pittsburgh sports media is just merciless. The Pittsburgh Post newspaper prints the headline that says, quote, Doheny runs away. His mind is thought to be deranged. And in the article, the article says, quote, his conduct is unquestionably the result of some mental derangement, end quote. And then talks about how the summer heat must somehow be affecting his mind. So, Steve, kind of to what you were alluding to earlier, the understanding of mental illness in 1903 clearly not what it is.
Have another Coke. It's good for you.
Yeah, right.
This tonic that the pharmacist came up with in Georgia just works wonders for your paranoia.
Think detectives are following you? Just stop standing in the sun for so long.
Well, I mean, how much sun did the Pittsburgh really see in 1903?
Yeah, that too was all the steel mills. Yeah. Yeah. So again, interesting observation. But man, that was such a merciless headline. Like his mind is thought to be deranged. Yikes. Like could you imagine somebody printing that today? Like again, like I hate to compare to like Antonio Brown, but just trying to think of somebody who's done some
Antonio Brown throws his helmet at Ben Roethlisberger. His mind is thought to be
right.
deranged. Like,
Antonio Brown rips off shirt and walks off field. His mind is thought to be deranged. I mean, he just man, it's a brutal headline. So we talked about how did Fred Clark respond. I mean, to his credit, he lets him go back to New England, and he actually comes up publicly and says, "Dohany's welcome back to the team." That's an interesting response because you go a bunch of different ways with that, right? Especially in 1903. But that's what Clark says. He's like, "Hey, if he just needs some time to get his head together, that's fine, and he's welcome back at any time." And that's actually what ends up happening. Doheny spent some time in his home to just kind of get his head straight, and he does decide to rejoin the team in August, and the Pirates are okay with that. And he actually comes back and does pretty good. He actually, well, better than good. He pitches lights out. So for a while, it seems like, hey, crisis averted. Not sure what was going on there with Ed, but everything seems okay now, and he's back on the mound and on a roll. Team's on a roll. The Pirates continue to barrel towards that third straight pennant and towards that first ever World Series tournament. But then in September, as the season's starting to wind down here to the end, Doheny starts acting strangely again. He doesn't pitch in any games for the first 2 weeks of that month. And everybody's kind of like, where's Doheny? Like thought he was back with the team and pitching. Well, he was with the team, but reportedly he was terrified to leave the clubhouse because if he took the field, these detectives that were apparently still following him would murder him.
Yeah, this guy's had like some sort of psychotic break. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist and I don't play one on TV or podcast, but yeah, he's having a lot of delusional behavior. It might be from the drinking or something he's eating, or back then they put all kinds of crazy stuff, and they didn't know. They didn't know what the effects of these things were. So it could have been something he was ingesting unknowingly. It couldn't have just been everyone. You could blame the drinking, and maybe that didn't help, but there might have been some other environmental factor that wasn't helping his mental health there. And that's just a total guess on my part.
No, that's a great observation. It absolutely could have been something environmental, especially back then, because you didn't have, you talked about like government regulation. You didn't have the safety of things you were ingesting.
I don't think the FDA Food and Drug Act came into effect until years later, till 10 or 12. Like you still had all this patent medicine and stuff, which when they made them start listing, like you didn't know, you just pick up like, Dr. Steve's, elixir of life, and it's like, it just like has a bunch of morphine in it or cocaine or something, something weird in it. It's like, oh yeah. Yeah. No wonder it makes you a little paranoid and hyper and you can't sleep at night.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, things are just starting to deteriorate again for Doheny. Later in the month, there's an incident where he attack some of his teammates. We don't know the details of what precipitated that. What we do know is that he goes home again, only this time it's not him leaving voluntarily. It's the Pirates sending him back to his home in New England. They have his brother, who's a clergyman, and his wife escort him back to his home in Massachusetts. He's placed under the care of a physician. And at this point, I'm not sure what the Pirates are thinking. Right? Are they just done with him, or probably more likely, are they hoping that maybe he can still come back for the World Series? After all, his home is in Massachusetts, is in the same place where they're going to be playing the Red Sox. So, last time he went home, he kind of got his head straight for a while and was able to come back. Would he be able to do that again? Who knows what they're thinking at this point. So the regular season ends with Pittsburgh and Boston as the respective pennant winners. And the World Championship Series is scheduled to begin on October 1st, 1903 at the Huntington Avenue grounds in Boston between the Pirates and the Red Sox. And by the way, just for historical accuracy, It's not until 1908 that the team in Boston officially adopts the name Red Sox. In 1903, they don't really have an official nickname. Sometimes you'll see them called the Pilgrims, but they were often referred to as the Boston Americans, simply because they were Boston's American League team. The Braves were the National League team in Boston at the time. So they were just the Boston American League team, the Boston Americans. But we're going to refer to them as the Red Sox in this episode because it's the same franchise. So just throwing that out there.
Always be the Boston Americans to me, Tim. I guess the Braves were the team Babe Ruth played for at the end of his career there.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, he played for both Boston teams.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is weird. He played for...
Yeah, he bookended his career with both Boston teams. Yep. So the World Series, October 1st, is the start date. The Pirates, they're in trouble before the series even starts. Honus Wagner, who's their best hitter, he's playing hurt. But the real trouble is with the pitching. So in 1903, we talked about the 28-game winner left. So the Pirates have a 3-man rotation that year. They literally have 3 guys who start the vast majority of the games that year. Those 3 guys are Deacon Phillippe, Sam Lever, and Ed Doheny.
That's not uncommon back then. 3-man rotations were pretty much the norm.
Correct. Yeah. So that's a strong 3-man rotation that has led them to another first-place finish. But as we know, Doheny's not there. And Lever's hurt also. He had a bad arm, which is probably not good if you're a pitcher. He may have injured it pitching, but allegedly he went trap shooting and injured it there right before the series started. So that was a kind of a big controversy. I'm sure the talk show lines lit up for that one. Twitter went nuts.
Yeah. All the letters to the editor.
Yeah, what's Sam Lever doing trap shooting right before the biggest?
Indubitably, it would have hurt our what would you say, our chances in the great championship, which is to come. I'm trying to speak like early 20th century there, late 19th century.
Well, and I mean, but that I can imagine. I mean, think about like Ben Roethlisberger on the motorcycle and stuff like that. Just right before the biggest time of the season, he apparently goes out and gets himself hurt doing something that's not baseball related. So that's, again, you basically have one healthy pitcher out of those 3 heading into the World Series. Doheny's still at home getting medical care when the series starts, and he's reportedly not doing well. The Pirates send him his uniform as a gift, and the Pirates apparently mean that to be like a nice gesture. Like, hey, you're still part of the team. Here's your uniform. He interprets it as meaning that the Pirates are done with them and here's your stuff, kind of like a cardboard box when someone's laid off from their job kind of thing. So it's starting to feel like this hope that the Pirates may have had that, well, maybe he'll be back for the World Series or the middle of the World Series. That's starting to look less and less likely. Game 1 of the World Series pits Deacon Phillippe of the Pirates against Boston's best pitcher, a guy you may have heard of named Cy Young.
Yes, he is. Wow. Cy Young is around and pitching.
He's not only around, he's 36 years old at this point.
Wow.
So he had been around for a while.
Yeah. I didn't realize Cy Young was that old. Wow.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And so he's definitely kind of on the back half of his career, but he's still very dominant. He led the American League in wins that year.
Well, maybe he'll win his own award.
Maybe someday.
It's like I award myself the Cy Young Award. I, Cy Young, give myself the Cy Young Award.
And if you don't know much about Cy Young, the reason that award for the best pitcher is named after him is because Cy Young won, I believe it was 511 games in his career.
Did you ever see how many games he lost?
A lot.
It's like over 300. It's insane. That's a record to never be broken.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's one of those records that's literally not possible to break. So Cy Young, that's why we still know him today because, again, there's a reason that award's named after him. He's a dominant pitcher. But in Game 1 of the 1903 World Series, the Pirates jump all over him. They score 4 runs in the first inning, and they cruise to a pretty easy 7-3 victory. The Pirates start Lever in Game 2. As we said, he had that bad arm, and he gets shelled. The first at bat for the Red Sox is a home run. It's actually an inside the park home run, which, fun fact, that's a feat that won't be repeated until the year 2015. Somebody leading off a World Series game with an inside the park home run. The Kansas City Royals did it in 2015. But Lever doesn't even make it out of the first inning. He just gets destroyed. So now the series is tied 1-1. Game 3 happens on October 3rd, which, if you're keeping track, is 2 days after Game 1. So they're just playing a game every day. And the Pirates have to start Phillippe again because they don't have a choice. They don't trust any of their other pitchers enough. And this should have been Dohany's start, but he's not there. Amazingly, Phillippe shuts down Boston again, and now the series goes back to Exposition Park in Pittsburgh. And in those days, it obviously took a little longer to travel. Plus, there was some rain in Pittsburgh. And Steve, you talked in a previous episode about how Exposition Park was right on the bank of the Allegheny River, and it often flooded. I think you had that story of what Art Rooney almost drowned in the outfield.
Well, there's no flood control either on the rivers. So,
yeah.
And this is what, September, October? Yeah, it can get rainy in October. So the water might be up. Yeah.
Yeah. So they actually have to postpone a day or two. So Game 4 is not until 3 days after Game 3. And guess who the Pirates trot out to pitch again versus Cy Young? It's Deacon Phillippe. So
wow.
Yeah. So Deacon Phillippe starts 3 of the first 4 games of this World Series. And guess what? He wins again.
Dude, that rain is the best thing that ever happened to the Pirates right there.
Well, yeah, exactly. And just to recap, Deacon Phillippe has thrown 3 complete game victories as of Game 4.
Well, what do you think his pitch counts do for the series at this point? 300, 200 pitches? I mean,
yeah. I mean, that's insane. 27 innings of baseball in 3 games. So that's amazing. After that Game 4 victory, the fans at Exposition Park, they hoist Phillippe on their shoulders. They carry him to the clubhouse. There's like a line for an hour to shake his hand. He's quickly becoming a local sports hero. Games 5 and 6 are the next 2 days. And so at this point, either Clark or Phillippe or both of them together decide he can't pitch anymore. He's got to rest his arm. The Pirates are also up 3-1, so they kind of have the luxury of doing that.
It's a 9-game series, so you got to win 5 games. It's not like you can't just win 1.
Sure. But you have a 2-game lead. And again,
I don't know. This is a tough spot because they got to win 2 more games.
They got to win 2 more games, but at some point you can't pitch the guy every single day.
No, yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
So Game 5, Lever still hurt. So the Pirates have a guy named Brickyard Kennedy, who's got an awesome name, but he's not a great pitcher. He's kind of a journeyman pitcher. He's actually playing in his final career season. And they send him to the mound to face Cy Young. And guess who gets the best of that one?
How many games is this for Cy Young now?
Yeah. Well, that's why your point about starting 800 some odd games in his career. Brickyard Kennedy's not going to beat Cy Young in the World Series. And so now it's 3-2. Game 6 is on a Thursday, and back then they played all the games during the day. There were no night games.
There's no lights, Tim. They don't have lights.
That's.
I mean, there's electricity. I mean, they do have electricity. Although they might. I don't know if they electrified the street lights yet. Yeah, they probably did.
They're definitely not. They definitely don't have bright enough lights to play.
Yeah. They don't even. I don't even think when was the Model T? Not till later. So they don't even have a car. People are literally walking to the field or parking their horse outside.
So all the games are on the daytime. Game 6 is on a Thursday. So Barney Dreyfuss goes to the Red Sox manager. He's like, hey, people have to work on weekdays. How about we postpone Game 6 until Saturday, and then more people can come, and we'll all make more money. That sounds like a good idea. Well, the Red Sox manager's having none of that because he's like, this isn't about making more money. This is about you trying to build in an extra 2 days so you can start Deacon Phillippe again, which, to his credit, he's probably right. That was probably the whole reason that Dreyfuss proposed that was so he could he could get 2 more days rest to try to start Phillippe. And the Red Sox manager actually quoted in the newspaper. He says, quote, "Money alone does not actuate us. We concede nothing."
I love the 19th century talk. I feel like I need a monocle. You should have a monocle, Tim, when you read this, and top hat. Oh,
money does not actuate us.
We concede nothing, sir. Good day.
I challenge you to a duel.
I will play you on Friday.
So I mean, that little ploy does not work. So now Sam Lever's got to start Game 6, and he's literally grimacing every time he throws a pitch, and the Pirates lose again. So now the series is tied 3-3. There's one more game left in Pittsburgh. It's Game 7. Which, as you said, Steve, it's a 9-game series, so that's not a deciding Game 7. And the Pirates now have to put Phillippe back on the mound. And it's a rematch of Game 1. It's Deacon Phillippe versus Cy Young. This time, though, Phillippe's just too spent from pitching, and the Red Sox win 7-3. So now the series heads back to Boston. They're up 4-3. All they have to do is win one of those final 2 games to win the title. So the Pirates up 3-1, now down 4-3. Back in Massachusetts, Ed Doheny, he's following the series, and when he hears the result of Game 7, that the Pirates lost, and now they're down to their final elimination game, something snaps. We mentioned he had a physician there. He throws the doctor out of the house head first through the front door and tells him to never come back. And the doctor's pretty rattled, obviously, by that. So he goes to the police, and the 1903 Boston police, in all their wisdom, determine, well, the man didn't want a doctor. That's not a crime.
Yeah. Definitely AMA at this point, huh?
Yeah.
Against medical advice.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there's no 302, but maybe, I don't know. Which is an involuntary commitment against your will for everybody who doesn't know that.
Well, even if there was, the police at that time just determined, well, hey, sorry, he fired you. Big deal. Like, you can't commit somebody or arrest somebody for that. It's a gross miscalculation, because the next day a nurse comes to the house for Doheny. Now, I say nurse because that's what all the local newspapers called this guy at the time. Some later accounts say he was actually a well-known faith healer. So, again, not quite sure what this guy's role was, if he was some kind of alternative medicine guy, if he was truly a nurse. Regardless of what his actual role was, Doheny turns on him too. He has a cast iron stove hidden under his bed, and when the guy isn't looking, he attacks him with this cast iron stove leg and seriously injures him. And Doheny's wife freaks out. He runs in with their toddler-age son in her arms, screaming for him to stop. The police come, and there's a huge standoff. Doheny has a weapon. He's threatening to kill anyone who tries to come into the house. And ultimately, 2 police officers figure out a way to distract him enough for the police to overpower him and handcuff him. He's charged with aggravated assault, and he's committed to the Danvers State Asylum. So the day before, there was no voluntary or involuntary commitment, but now he's attacked and almost murdered somebody, and now he's committed to a state asylum. The nurse / faith healer guy does survive, although his injuries are pretty severe. Literally, if the police and Doheny's wife hadn't intervened, he would have just killed this guy. And here's a quote from his wife. The next day, she says, quote, "The ball games between Boston and Pittsburgh made Eddie go wrong. He could not stand the strain, and when he read that his old team was losing and he wasn't there, he just couldn't stand it. He used to moan when he would read about Lever's arm being bad, and he wanted to rush away to the club. He was confident he could beat Boston, and when Boston began beating Pittsburgh, it was awful the way he felt. The news yesterday morning that Boston had again beaten Pittsburgh, making it 4-3 was entirely too much for Eddie." Wow. So, I mean, she's literally saying that the news of the Pirates going down 4-3 made him, You said, Steve, I think you used the term psychotic break. It sounds like he probably had that before this, but it's like it went to some other level.
And now he's kind of blaming himself because he's not there. Yeah. I like how they spell Pittsburgh in this article.
That's how Pittsburgh was spelled back then. Did not add the H
there was
until later.
no formalized spelling. And then there was without an H there for years. That's how you can date things because there is a period of time. But I think this might be before that because then they got rid of the H and then they brought back the H. But
Okay.
yeah, it's a whole thing.
But
fun times. In the Bostons. You could beat the Bostons. I love the 19th century.
Yes.
Who doesn't?
Well, definitely,
except
regardless
for like
of
mental health problems and.
I was going to say, regardless of the kind of the odd dialect and the weird spellings, obviously very sad. I mean, they had a young son, and now, she's just beside herself because her husband is now, committed to an asylum and went completely nuts and tried to kill somebody who really wasn't doing anything other than to come to take care of him. So that's incredibly sad. While this is all happening, obviously there's still a World Series going on. The Pirates are now in an elimination game in Boston, which is a tough place for them to play. In a previous episode, Steve, you had mentioned the Royal Rooters.
That was the Boston fans, yeah.
Yeah. So it was this group of fans. I think they were associated with a bar that was outside of the ballpark there. I think it was called maybe McGreevy's or something like that. There's this group.
I think it was called Cheers.
Yeah. Cliff Clavin was in there.
Sam and Diane. Yeah.
It was this group of guys that were pretty boisterous and rowdy. Actually, we're going to play a clip here of Pirates third baseman, the description of these guys from Pirates third baseman Tommy Leach.
That was probably the wildest series ever played. Arguing all the time between the teams, between the players and the umpires, and especially between the players and the fans. That's the truth. The fans were part of the game in those days. They'd pour right out onto the field and argue with the players and the umpires. It was sort of hard to keep the game going sometimes, to say the least. I think those Boston fans actually won that series for the Pilgrims. We beat them 3 out of the first 4 games, and then they'd start singing that damn Tessie song. You could hardly play ball. They were singing Tessie so damn loud. Only instead of singing Tessie, I love you madly, they'd sing special lyrics. Like when Honus Wagner came to bat, they'd sing, Honus, why do you hit so badly? Sort of got on your nerves after a while.
Is that from Ken Burns Baseball?
It is from Ken Burns, yep.
So that might not actually been Tommy Leach. That was someone.
No, that was not Tommy Leach. That's Tommy Leach. Somebody reading his recounting of the story. Yes, correct. But yeah, funny. That's kind of like the 1903 equivalent of like Johnny Cueto dropping the ball, right? Like it literally got to them. And these guys, this Royal Rooters, they actually traveled to Pittsburgh too. So they were.
Yeah, it was like a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, they were actually there for the Pittsburgh games as well. Fun fact about the Royal Rooters: JFK's grandfather is one of their members.
Oh wow! So Kennedy. Wow, that wouldn't even been John Kennedy.
That would have been Joe's father.
Yeah, I was about to say that wasn't Joe Kennedy. Wow.
Yeah. He was a member of the Royal Rooters.
And this is before they made their fortune too, right? Yeah, because Prohibition was not till 19 after the war. Yeah. Well, there you go. They were just some Royal Rooters back then. No presidential aspirations for them yet.
Yep. So the Game 8 starter for the Pirates. Any guesses on who that is, Steve?
Well, looking at your note, I get the feeling I think it came down to a choice of like 3 people: Deacon Philippi, or Deacon Philippi, and then maybe Deacon Philippi out of the bullpen. Yeah,
right. So yeah, Deacon Philippi is your Game 8 starter. He's exhausted. He does pitch okay. He only gives up 3 runs, which isn't terrible, but he gets 0 run support, and the Pirates lose 3-0, and that's it. That's the series. The Red Sox win the World Series. And the Pirates just ran out of pitchers. I mean, they just ran out of guys. They're also not very good in some other areas. They did make 13 errors in the final 4 games, and they only bat 237 for the series. So they're not exactly helping at the plate. Wagner, we mentioned Honus Wagner came into the series hurt. He has a terrible series. He says that he was, quote, a joke in that series, and he failed any time he needed a clutch hit. He failed. So he's really down on himself. It's a real low point in his career. And that's it. The Pirates lose that World Series. So let's talk about the kind of the aftermath of that. It's a happier ending for Phillippe and Wagner. They do eventually lead the Pirates to a World Series title against Detroit 6 years later, and they both end up in the Hall of Fame. Barney Dreyfuss, he really endears himself to the players when he gives his share of the gate receipts of that World Series back to the players. And it's funny because the Pirates players actually end up making more money for losing the World Series than the Red Sox players make for winning it. So that kind of that says a lot about what kind of person Barney Dreyfuss was, right? Basically giving his revenue for the World Series back to the players at a time, like you said, Steve. The reserve, that's what it was called.
The reserve clause, yeah.
Yeah, the reserve clause, you basically own people, you could treat them like cattle, and he's giving them money he doesn't have to. In 33 seasons of Dreyfuss owning the team, the Pirates won 6 pennants and 2 World Series. 33 years is almost as long as the McClatchy-Nutting era, which has produced 0 of those things. Dreyfuss also builds Forbes Field in 1909, which is pretty significant. And Phillippe and Wagner are pallbearers at his funeral when he passes away in 1932. The National Baseball Commission, that panel that was going to govern the 2 leagues, that's dissolved in 1920 after the Black Sox scandal that you mentioned before, Steve, the 8-man out thing. And it's replaced with a singular commissioner, which is how the sport's governed today.
And it's all Mountain Landis was the
very,
guy. Yeah, he was
very racist guy. Yeah.
Not that great. Yeah.
Well, he cleaned
up baseball, but he didn't let any African Americans play. So
right,
I guess you take the good with the bad, I guess.
Yeah, kind of a checkered history there for that guy. There's no World Series played in 1904, but starting in 1905, it does become an annual event, which is still played today, obviously. As for Ed Doheny, he languishes in the mental hospital, and those places back then, I really can't imagine. I'm sure the conditions were not good. This was around the time that Nellie Bly wrote that famous expose about asylums. I think that was about 10 years before this. So maybe there had been some reforms by this point, but they're still doing things like electroshock therapy. They still don't really understand mental health.
They still do electroshock therapy. I was shocked to find that out. Yes. It's much more refined, because you figure electronics have come along, but it's much more refined now. Now they have, they didn't have any of the, what do they call it, psychiatric meds that they have now.
Okay.
So, yeah, there was really nothing they could do for these people besides lock them up for their own good. You had places like Bedlam and stuff. There wasn't much you could do to help somebody that was really sick or schizophrenic or, believe that people were out to get him. He either had schizophrenia and it finally manifested. How old was he? He was in his 20s. So, I mean, that's kind of a late onset, but that's not uncommon or unheard of. So, and it could have been our environmental too. He could have got into something bad, but I feel bad for him. I mean, it just, if he would have been alive today, maybe they could have got him on some medications and got him right.
Yeah, I mean, and that's an interesting, if that were today, could he have been helped? There's no guarantee of that, right? I mean, if he had something that was that wrong, maybe it couldn't have been fixed. But definitely back then, again, I mentioned Nellie Bly. They just recently put a statue of her at the airport, and that story is very interesting. She had herself committed as an undercover reporter too, to write about the conditions in these mental hospitals, and it was really, really, really ugly. And to your point, Steve, that's all they could kind of do was lock people up. And
they had these things called cribs, and they weren't like a crib like a baby. It looked like a cot, but it was like four-sided cage. It almost looked like a dog kennel, and they would put people in there. And because, like, to keep them from, like, when somebody's in that kind of state, like a manic state like that, they're going to lash out like he did that one guy with a poker. And,
yeah.
Or they'll harm themselves. They'll start, like, clawing at their eyes or banging their head off the wall. Or, there's a reason they put people in padded rooms. It wasn't just because they thought it was fun or straitjackets. It's because they had no medications. Now they would give them medications that would control those behaviors, but back then they just didn't have the advances in modern medicine that they do now.
And that's a good point. I mean, you can say the conditions were terrible, but kind of what else were they going to do, right? What else?
It's always easy. Just think like 100 years from now, people look back at like the medications we're giving them now and be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe they gave them that for that, because it's going to advance that much further. So yeah, you always got to have a little bit of perspective when you look into things like this. Not that there didn't need to be improvements and all that, there definitely were somebody, definitely was probably mistreating people and such, but I don't know.
Dohany's wife writes in 1905 that he, quote, shows no signs of improvement and is no longer able to recognize anybody, despite the fact that he had frequent family and friends and former teammates all visiting him. Doheny dies in 1916 at the age of 43, apparently totally unaware that he'd ever been a major league ball player for a championship contender.
That's really sad. Yeah, it's really sad. Like, that's unbelievable that somebody could deteriorate to that condition. But yeah,
it's we talked about our last episode when we were talking about the 2004 draft. We were talking about a lot of what ifs, and there's so many what ifs here. Because the Pirates, again, they had a 3-1 lead without 2 of their 3 pitchers. If Doheny is able to pitch in that series, they probably win. I mean, they probably beat Boston, and then they're just an outright dynasty. I mean, that would be 3 consecutive pennants and also the first ever World Series title. So basically they're the best team in the National League. They've beaten the best team in the American League. That's an all-time team. And as it stands, because they lose that series, it's really not.
Well, that would have been a 3rd World Series too. They would have won that World Series. Then maybe they still win the one in 1908. Yeah, that would have. Wow. Yeah, that would have been.
Yeah, again, just a lot of what ifs, and again, a lot of this does center around, we mentioned they weren't hitting as well, and Hannes Wagner was hurt and they made a bunch of errors. But if they would have got the pitching they had gotten all season from Doheny, they were up 3-1. They probably win that series. So it's a sad story obviously for the team, because that literally probably cost them not only a championship but a place in history. But it's obviously even a sadder story for, this guy and his family and everybody that cared about him. Just really unfortunate. And one of those things that I don't think people remember. I think people, I think it's fairly well known maybe that the Pirates played in that first ever World Series, but
yeah, all the details are kind of lost.
Yeah, exactly. And they lost to Boston. Okay, well, they lost. Well, they lost because they ran out of pitchers. I mean, they literally just ran out of guys. And that's really the main reason they lost. I mean, I know Tommy Leach blamed it on the fans, but come on. Like, if they would have had Doheny, they probably win the series.
It was those fans in that darn song.
Yeah, changing the lyrics to the song. So yeah, anyway, kind of a bummer, but again, kind of one of those stories you don't know of, and to me, they're just that stories like that are fascinating. So, hoping you enjoyed that. Please check us out on the web or on social media. There's a bunch of links for that in the show description. Please rate us on whatever your podcast service is and subscribe. And next time.